Hey everyone, welcome to the Chilling Hour, where the stories never let you sleep. Travis Moore, age 34. You ever been completely alone? Like truly alone? I'm not talking about sitting at home on a Saturday night or taking a quiet walk. I mean alone, somewhere deep where even your own thoughts sound too loud. That's what it was like that day on Grapevine Lake. I've been fishing since I was old enough to hold a rod. My dad used to take me to Grapevine every summer. It's an old man-made lake out in the woods of northern Michigan, about 2 hours from where I live in Traverse City. Used to be a mining town there, until the dam flooded it out in the 50s. The stories go that the old town's still down there. Streets, houses, even a church steeple poking out when the water's low. People say you can hear the church bell some nights when the fog rolls in. I always thought it was just a good campfire story. Last August, I decided to take a solo fishing trip. My wife Rachel couldn't come. She was working double shifts at the hospital, so I figured, why not a weekend to myself? Just me, a tent, a cooler of beer, and my old John boat. The first night was peaceful. Crickets, owls, the water lapping gently at the dock. I sat by my little campfire, staring at the moon's reflection rippling across the lake. It was one of those nights that feels like the whole world has gone still. The second day, I took the boat out early. The lake was smooth as glass, covered in that light morning mist. I set my line, cracked open a beer, and just drifted. For a while, I felt free. Until I noticed something odd. About 50 yards out, the fog thickened, and I swear I saw something dark just under the surface. At first, I thought it was a log, but then it moved. Slowly, deliberately. I squinted, and I could make out what looked like a roof? A triangle shape rising out of the water, just barely breaking the surface before sinking again. That didn't make sense. The water level had been low this year, sure, but not that low. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I rowed toward it. When I reached the spot, the water was strangely darker, almost black. My fish finder wasn't picking up anything but static. I leaned over the edge and tried to see down, but the water was murky. That's when I noticed the air was colder. Not just cooler, cold. My breath came out in white puffs, and then I heard something faint, like bells. Soft at first, distant, then clearer, a slow metallic tolling sound coming from beneath the water. I froze. Every instinct in me screamed to leave, but I didn't. I stayed there, listening, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. Then something hit the bottom of my boat, hard. It wasn't a bump like hitting a branch or a fish surfacing. It was solid. I jumped, grabbed my oar, and leaned over. That's when I saw it. A pale hand pressed against the underside of my boat. Just for a second before it slid away into the dark. I panicked. I started rowing like hell, splashing water everywhere. I didn't stop until I reached the shore, my heart slamming in my chest. I sat there for a while, staring out at the lake. It looked calm again, like nothing happened. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the light or maybe some weird debris from the old town. But I couldn't shake the image of that hand. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale skin against the metal hull. Around midnight, the wind picked up and the fog rolled in again, thick as smoke this time. Then I heard it again. The bell. Slow, steady, like it was ringing from beneath the lake. I stepped outside the tent. The air was freezing cold. My breath fogged in front of me. I walked to the water's edge, trying to see through the mist. That's when I noticed something bobbing out on the water. A shape, faint but human. It looked like someone standing chest deep in the lake. A man, maybe? His shoulders barely visible in the moonlight. I called out, "Hey, you all right out there?" But he didn't answer. Didn't even move. Just stood there. The fog drifted closer and I could make out more. His head was tilted down, his arms hanging limp at his sides. The longer I looked, the more I realized something was off about him. His clothes weren't modern. They looked old, like 1940s or 50s old. I turned to grab my flashlight, and when I looked back, he was gone. I didn't sleep at all after that. The next morning, I was ready to pack up and leave, but when I went to start my truck, the damn thing wouldn't turn over. Battery dead, which made no sense. It was new. I tried the radio, the lights, nothing. That's when I saw the wet footprints, leading from the lake, bare feet. They stopped right beside my tent, then disappeared. I'll admit it, I lost it. I started throwing my stuff into the truck bed, yelling like an idiot. I must have looked insane, screaming at an empty lake, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get out. After a while, I calmed down enough to try one more time. I turned the key, and the engine finally coughed to life. Relief washed over me. I backed out fast, gravel spraying, but before I could hit the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw someone sitting in my boat, just sitting there. A man, soaked, with his head bowed forward. I slammed the brakes and turned around. The boat was empty, completely empty. I left everything, my cooler, my gear, even the tent. I didn't stop until I hit the main road. I got home around sunset and didn't say a word to Rachel about it. I just took a long shower and sat in silence. I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was stress or lack of sleep or just the way fog plays tricks on your eyes. But the next morning, I found something that made my stomach drop. A small, rusted metal bell, sitting on the driver's seat of my truck. It wasn't there when I got in last night. It looked old, like something you'd find in a church tower, except small enough to hold in your hand. It was damp, and it smelled like the lake. I threw it out, of course. But the weird thing is, that night, I heard it again, that same slow, metallic ringing. Except this time, it wasn't distant. It was in my backyard. Rachel was asleep. I got up, grabbed my flashlight, and looked out the window. The fog had rolled in again. Thick, swirling fog that shouldn't even exist that far inland, and through it, I could see something by the edge of the yard. A shape. A man, dripping wet, standing still, staring right at the house. I swear to God, I could see the outline of his face. Pale, swollen, eyes open but empty. His clothes clung to his body, old-fashioned, waterlogged. And in his hand, he was holding that same bell. He raised it slowly, and it rang, once. I ran to wake Rachel, but when I looked back, he was gone. No footprints, no sound, nothing. That was 3 months ago. Since then, things have gotten worse. I hear the bell sometimes in the night, always faint, always outside. Sometimes I see wet footprints near the back door, or hear dripping in the hallway when there's no leak. Last week I woke up to find water pooling on the floor beside my bed. Cold, muddy water. And on my nightstand, that same rusted bell. I threw it away again, drove 20 miles out and tossed it into the woods. But I know it'll come back, because now, every time I close my eyes, I see him, standing in the lake, motionless, waiting. And somewhere, deep inside, I can hear the faint toll of that bell. I looked up the history of Grey Pine Lake after that. Turns out, the town that was flooded back in the 50s, the church bell tower collapsed during the flood, trapping a handful of people inside, including the pastor. The legend says they still ring the bell to warn people away. I should have listened. Now I think, whatever's under that lake didn't want to be disturbed, and it followed me home. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and hear the sound of water sloshing under the bed. And every time I hear that bell, closer, louder, I wonder how long before I end up back at that lake, under the water, ringing it myself. Story the end.
Story number 2.
My name's Derek Matthews, and I'm 37 years old. What I'm about to tell you isn't some campfire tale or internet creepypasta. It actually happened to me 5 years ago, on a cold autumn morning in northern Minnesota. I used to love fishing, especially the quiet of being alone on the water. But after that day, I can't even drive past a lake without getting chills. It started in late October of 2020. My buddy Sam had to cancel our weekend trip at the last minute because his kid came down with the flu. I'd already packed my gear and taken time off, so I figured, screw it, I'd go alone. I drove out to Lake Wendigo, a small, secluded lake about 2 hours north of Duluth. Locals said the name came from old Ojibwe legends, about an evil spirit that haunted the woods and the water. I'd heard the stories before, but they always just seemed like folklore, something to spook tourists. The drive there was uneventful, just endless pine trees and patches of fog that seemed to hang in place. I got to the lake around noon. The air had that sharp bite of late fall, and the water looked like glass, completely still, not a ripple. There wasn't another soul around. Perfect for some quiet fishing. I rented an old aluminum boat from the bait shop down the road. The guy running the place, an older man named Harold, looked at me kind of strange when I told him I was going to Wendigo Lake. He said, "Son, don't stay out there past dusk. That lake's got a bad habit of keeping folks." I laughed it off, figuring he was just being dramatic. He didn't laugh back. By 1 p.m., I was out on the water. The sun was low and golden, reflecting off the surface like melted amber. I anchored near the middle of the lake and dropped my line. For hours, nothing happened. No bites, no movement, just eerie silence. Even the usual sounds of nature, the birds, the wind, the bugs, were missing. It was unnervingly still. Around 4 p.m., I finally got a bite, a strong one. The line jerked hard enough that it nearly pulled the rod out of my hand. I fought it for a few minutes, heart pounding, thinking I had hooked a monster bass. But when I finally reeled it in, my excitement turned to confusion, and then horror. It wasn't a fish. It was a boot. An old, muddy, waterlogged leather boot. I know, sounds cliche, right? But here's the thing. There was still a foot inside it. I dropped the rod instantly. My stomach turned, and I nearly tipped the boat over. I remember staring at that boot as it bobbed in the water beside the boat, the pale flesh of the ankle visible just above the torn edge. I reached for my phone to call 911, but before I could, I heard something like whispering. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the air was dead calm. The whispering grew louder, clearer, until I could make out words, low, gurgling, like someone speaking underwater. "Help me." I froze. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. The voice was coming from the lake, from under the boat. I leaned over the edge, staring into the dark green water. And that's when I saw her. A face. Pale, bloated, hair floating like seaweed around her head. Her eyes were wide open, staring right up at me. Her mouth was moving, bubbles rising to the surface. "Help me," she gurgled again. I screamed and stumbled backward so hard I hit the side of the boat. The boat rocked violently, and I almost went overboard. When I looked again, she was gone. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the oars. I didn't care about my gear. I just wanted off that damn lake. But before I could start rowing, the boat lurched. Something underneath had hit the bottom of it. Hard. Once. Then again. Each hit made the boat rattle like something was slamming into it from below. I shouted, "Who's there?" My voice echoed across the empty lake. No response. Just another bang, harder this time. I could see the water rippling around me, forming small circles that spread outward like breath. Then I saw a hand. A pale, waterlogged hand gripped the edge of my boat from below. The fingers were grayish blue, nails cracked and jagged. I kicked at it instinctively, but another hand came up from the other side, clawing at the rim, pulling down. The boat tilted. I screamed again, grabbed my paddle, and swung as hard as I could. The hands vanished beneath the water. I didn't wait. I started rowing as fast as humanly possible, my arms burning. Every time the paddle hit the water, I saw flashes, shapes, faces, just under the surface, watching me. When I finally reached the shore, I fell out of the boat and hit the mud. I turned back once more, gasping, and that's when I saw it. Her head. The same woman, floating in the middle of the lake, eyes fixed on me. She wasn't drifting. She was rising. The water around her started to ripple and bubble as if boiling. Then she vanished again, just sank straight down, leaving the surface calm and glassy once more. I ran. I didn't even pull the boat up or grab my things. I just sprinted for my truck, heart pounding in my ears. I must have peeled out of that dirt lot doing 80 to out, gravel spraying everywhere. When I got back into town, I went straight to the sheriff's office. I told them what I'd seen. They didn't believe me at first, but when I mentioned the boot with the foot, that got their attention. They sent divers out the next morning. They found 5 bodies in that lake. 5. All drowned. All in various stages of decay. The sheriff said they were missing persons from as far back as the 1980s. Fishermen, campers, even a teenage girl who disappeared after prom night. But here's what made my blood run cold. They said one of the victims had been found before, years ago, but somehow she had gone missing again from the morgue. That was her. The woman I saw. Her name was Rebecca Hill, 26 years old. She drowned in that lake in 1991 after her boyfriend supposedly pushed her from a boat. The boyfriend claimed it was an accident, but no one could ever prove it. They said her body had been recovered and buried in the local cemetery. But when they checked her grave after this, her coffin was empty. After that, I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up at night sweating, hearing dripping water and those same faint whispers. Sometimes I'd dream I was back on that lake, the boat rocking beneath me, the water black and endless. A few weeks later, I went back to return the rental gear. I almost didn't go inside, but I needed to face it. Harold, the old man at the bait shop, was behind the counter. When he saw me, he just nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting me. He said, "You saw her, didn't you?" I didn't even have to answer. He looked down, shaking his head. She don't let go easy. Folks think Wendigo Lake's cursed, but it's not the spirit in the woods. It's her. She was wronged, and now she takes what the lake gives her. I asked him if anyone ever tried to drain it, or bless it, or something. He said, they tried. The divers that went down to check the bottom in the 90s, they never came back up. That lake don't give back what it takes. I left and never went back. To this day, I still get letters and calls from people who claim to have heard my story online or in the paper. Some tell me they've fished Wendigo Lake since then and seen things. Lights under the water, a woman's face just below the surface, voices whispering their names. One guy said he woke up in the middle of the night to find his boots soaking wet, muddy water pooling by his bed. I don't know what to make of it. Maybe she's not bound to that lake anymore. Maybe she's looking for new water. But I'll tell you this, I haven't picked up a fishing rod since that day. I can't even stand the sound of water dripping in my sink. Sometimes if I close my eyes and listen hard enough, I swear I can still hear that voice from the deep tank gurgling and pleading. Help me. I know I should have left that boot alone. I know I should have turned back the second the wind went quiet. But it's too late for that now. Because ever since that day, I haven't felt alone. Not once. There's this constant feeling that something's watching me from behind mirrors, puddles, any reflection of water. And every time I try to ignore it, something happens. Last month, I was driving home during a storm. My windshield wipers were squeaking, rain pounding against the glass, when out of nowhere, I saw her reflection. Not on the road, not on the hood, in the puddles gathering along the shoulder. Her face staring up through the rainwater, lips moving. I slammed the brakes and nearly lost control. When I looked again, she was gone. So yeah, call me crazy, call me traumatized, but I know what I saw. I know what I felt. That lake isn't just haunted, it's hungry. And whatever's down there, it remembers every soul it's ever taken. If you ever find yourself near northern Minnesota and someone mentions Lake Wendigo, don't go. Don't fish there. Don't even step close enough to see your reflection in that water. Because once she sees you, she won't forget. Story the end.
Story number 3.
My name's Travis McCord. I'm 38 years old, and I'm not the kind of guy who usually believes in ghost stories. I grew up in Michigan, spent most of my life fishing, hunting, camping. You know, the kind of stuff that makes you feel grounded. But after what happened 2 summers ago, I can't go near a lake without shaking. I haven't touched a fishing pole since. This is something that's burned into me, something I can't forget, even if I tried. It was June, a warm weekend, when my buddy Eric called me up. He wanted to hit up a spot he'd heard about, Lake Ashwood, tucked deep in northern Michigan woods. Not many people knew about it. The locals said it used to be a quarry back in the 40s, and after a flood, it became a lake. I remember thinking it'd be peaceful, no tourists, no noisy boats. Just a quiet weekend with beer, fishing, and good company. When we pulled up, it was almost sunset. The road there was long and narrow, lined with birch trees that seemed to lean toward us, their white trunks glowing faintly in the fading light. The air smelled damp and earthy, like rain had just passed. We set up camp near the water's edge. The lake was still, too still. No frogs croaking, no insects buzzing, not even ripples on the surface. It was like glass, dark and perfect. The only sound was the creak of the dock nearby, swaying gently even though there wasn't any wind. Eric joked, "Looks like we've got the whole place to ourselves." He wasn't wrong. The place was dead quiet. We started fishing early the next morning. Mist clung to the lake like a blanket, and I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The water looked black, like ink. We didn't catch a single thing for hours. The weird part? I didn't even see a fish jump or ripple, not one sign of life. Then around mid-morning, my line went tight. I remember the thrill shooting through me. Finally, a bite. I started reeling in, but the line felt wrong, heavy. It didn't tug or fight like a fish would. It just dragged. Eric leaned over my shoulder, trying to help. "Man, whatever that is, it's huge," he said, grinning. But as I reeled closer, this sour, rotting smell hit us, like dead animals and swamp water mixed together. The line grew heavier, almost like it was snagged on something deep. Then suddenly the tension snapped. I fell backward, and the hook came flying out of the water, with something caught on it. It was fabric. A piece of fabric that looked old, waterlogged, like a scrap of a shirt. But the weirdest thing? It was wrapped around a lock of hair. Blonde hair, matted and pale. Eric laughed it off, saying maybe it was from some drowned deer or trash from campers, but I couldn't shake the smell. That rot was clinging to the air. I tossed it away, but I swear when it landed I heard something, like a soft gasp coming from the water. That night, the air was colder. We built a fire and tried to shake off the creepiness, drinking and laughing, but the woods felt wrong. The darkness around us seemed alive, watching. Even the firelight didn't reach far. Around midnight, Eric said he had to take a leak and walk down toward the shore. He was gone a while. Too long. When he came back, he looked pale. His hands were wet. "Dude, what happened?" I asked. He didn't answer at first. He just sat there, staring at the fire. Finally, he said, "There's a woman in the lake." I laughed, thinking he was messing with me, but he didn't smile. He just kept staring into the flames, his voice low. "I saw her, standing in the water like she was waiting. Her hair was all over her face. I thought maybe it was some crazy swimmer, so I called out. She didn't move. Then I blinked, and she was gone." He looked at me with this hollow expression. Her eyes, man. I saw her eyes right before she disappeared. They were white. We tried to sleep after that, but I couldn't. Every few minutes, I thought I heard something, splashing near the shore, soft whispers coming from the water. Once, I thought I saw someone walking along the dock, but when I shone the flashlight, nothing was there. The next morning, Eric was gone. His sleeping bag was empty. His boots were still there, his phone, everything. Just gone. Panic set in fast. I called out for him, ran to the shore, and that's when I saw footprints, wet, barefoot footprints leading into the water. They just stopped at the edge. The lake was calm again, like it had swallowed him whole. I called 911 from my truck, and the sheriff's department sent a search team. They brought in divers. I waited by the dock, shivering even though it was sunny. After a few hours, one of the divers came up shaking his head. Nothing. They told me Lake Ashwood had a history. People went missing there. Always fishermen, campers, hikers. They said the lake used to be a mining site that flooded back in 1946, drowning several workers who never made it out. But the strangest part? Some of the people who disappeared over the years were found days later, floating near the surface, but their lungs weren't filled with water. They looked like they'd drowned somewhere else. I didn't know what to believe. They searched for Eric for 3 days. Never found him. His family blamed me, said maybe we got drunk and he fell in, but I swear he didn't fall. That lake took him. A week later, I started having dreams. Every night, I'd see Eric standing in the lake, his skin pale and swollen, his eyes white, just like he described hers. He wouldn't speak, just raise his hand, pointing at me, then at the water. One night, I woke up to the smell of rot again. It was in my room, the same stench from that day. And there was water, actual water, pooling on the floor, seeping from under my bed. I remember my hands shaking as I lifted the blanket. Nothing was there. But the sheets were damp, and I heard a faint sound, like something dripping. That's when I saw it. My fishing pole, the same one I'd used at Ashwood, was leaning against the wall. I hadn't touched it since that trip. But the line was out, unspooling slowly, like something was tugging on it from the other side. I cut that damn line and threw the rod away the next morning. I tried to move on, but weird things kept happening. I'd find wet footprints near my back door. My sink would fill with dirty water overnight. Once I found fish scales in my bathtub. I lived nowhere near a lake. 3 months later, I got a call from the sheriff's department. They said a body had surfaced in Lake Ashwood, male, mid-30s. They thought it might be Eric. I drove up there, though every part of me didn't want to. The lake looked the same, calm, black, silent. When I saw the body, I almost threw up. It was Eric, all right? But he looked wrong. His eyes were gone. His mouth was open, like he'd been screaming underwater. The coroner told me something strange. There was no water in his lungs. But they found algae and silt packed deep into his throat, almost like something had forced it down there. His hands were raw, shredded like he'd been clawing at something. I couldn't handle it. I left Michigan a week later and moved to Ohio, thinking distance would help. But the nightmares followed me. Sometimes I still wake up to the sound of water slapping against the walls. One night, not long ago, I woke up to my phone ringing. When I looked, it said Eric calling. My stomach dropped. I had deleted his number long ago. I answered, trembling, and all I heard was breathing. Wet, bubbling breathing. Then a voice, Eric's whispering, "She wants you too." I threw the phone across the room, but the line stayed open. I could hear the faint sound of water dripping until it went dead. After that, I started seeing her, the woman Eric described. In reflections, in puddles after rain. Once, while driving home late, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw her sitting in the back seat, hair covering her face, soaking wet. By the time I slammed on the brakes and turned around, she was gone, but the seat was damp. I know what people think, that I'm crazy, traumatized. Maybe I am. But I know what I saw, what I smelled, what I heard. I think whatever's in that lake isn't just water. It's a graveyard, a place that feeds. Something ancient lives there. Something that needs to drag people down, maybe to replace what it lost when the mine flooded. I've tried everything. Priests, therapists, even burning what little fishing gear I had left. But it doesn't matter. The smell of rot still comes back, stronger every time. And sometimes, when I turn on the tap, the water runs black for a second before it clears. I think she's coming for me next. I don't go outside at night anymore. I don't sleep near mirrors, and I keep the faucets turned off. But lately, I've been hearing things again. Faint splashing, whispering voices that sound like Eric, calling my name. I can't run from it. Maybe it's already inside me somehow, tied to that day, that lake, that moment I pulled up that piece of fabric and hair. If anyone ever finds this recording or letter or whatever's left of me, don't go to Lake Ashwood. Don't fish there. Don't even get near the water. Because once it sees you, once it smells you, it never lets go. Story the end.